All right. Back for our second part on human emotions with Nate and Andrew. Nate and Andrew have switched spots on the screen, but they are still, um, still with us and in different ways. So we want to go back to this passage, Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. Who can know it? And we were just dialoguing that maybe we should dive back into this and kind of revisit it. What does that mean in the context of being a Christian and human depravity? And can you guys break that down? And what's a healthy view of that and unhealthy view of that?
So one of the things that I just, we started going and we went to a great direction last video, but one of the things that hit me is that I just don't think the ancient Near East thought the word heart isn't what Western culture is heart, where our heart is our emotions. I think it was more of an inner being, which probably included emotions, but was also thoughts. So the heart being, what is it? Deceptive of all things and desperately wicked.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't just emotions, because you could use that and be in a Western mindset and like, oh, the emotions will lead you astray, but the thoughts will not. And that's just not true. You can have so many bad thoughts. I mean, there's whole therapy sessions, cognitive
Behavioral therapy.
cognitive behavioral therapy, which talks about having correct thinking that needs to happen. So our thinking can be off, our emotions can be off, but our thinking can be right and our emotions can be right. And there's something about having to form that. But then the verse you said, what it continues on and says, who can know it? So I think the real issue of the verse is, because of sin, our inability to even self-reflect upon the inner person well enough to correct what's going on in us.
Absolutely. I think that to kind of tag off of that, the interconnection of thoughts and feelings, it's this a false dichotomy to think you can separate the two, to think that you can have an emotion separate from a thought and a thought separate from your emotion. We think about things based on the reaction to whatever it is. So let's say, I have said this, whatever, to you. You could be thinking, oh, I'm bored, I'm tired of this. And now your thoughts are, I'm bored, I'm tired of this, because of the emotion of what you just felt. Or I really like what he's saying. Well, that's because of an emotional reaction you had. It's taking you to different places. And so your thoughts are interconnected. But I really like, and I want to emphasize that aspect of the inner being, who can know it. And the concept that because of sin, we aren't really fully able to understand ourselves. Because of that whole concept of being fallen. However, I do think that people will use that concept to abuse other people. That just because you can't know it, you can't trust yourself. What they don't do, the flip side is, well, in that case, I can't trust you either. That part somehow seems to be forgotten. That we're all in this human experience together.
Yeah, because Jeff, why don't you finish? Can you read more? Because it says, who can know it? And that doesn't mean that I need some guru or someone else to fix or tell me what my issues are. Even though we have a tendency to be able to see the blind spots in others easier than we can see in ourselves. And so I do think with someone with the right motive and attitude could be very helpful, but there could be a lot of abuse happen. But who ultimately is the one that we need to go to?
Right. In verse 10, so like there's a response to verse 9. So we need obviously continue reading. So thank you for bringing that up. I, the Lord, search the heart, I test the mind, and even to every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings.
So ultimately there needs to be a God interaction, a dialogue with God on changing the inner being, the thoughts and the feelings. And that process is, I think sometimes we get this legal transaction of salvation, which I truly believe in, the substitution and all that, which is the starting point of then, okay, I have this protective covering of the blood of Jesus, I'm saved, I'm good. And so then what? And I think that's where character, formation, which is trying to create the right thoughts and the right feelings for the right situations, which we were talking about, inappropriate last time. I think it's ultimately character formation that allows us to be able to have the thoughts that we need to be thinking about, which are fueled by the emotions that we need, and they work on each other so that we start thinking and feeling the way God would want us to be. And it's a work in progress, and that's going to take all of our lives.
So Nate, would you consider the inner being to be either the character or at least part of the character?
From what I understand, I think the inner being's like who we are at our core. Character. Now, we mentioned, we were talking in between sessions, I'm not talking about personality. That's more like the container.
Yeah.
Yeah. The container. And I think we all have different containers, just like we all have different personalities. But the character, what you fill the container with.
Ooh, I love that.
Important. So
and I couldn't agree more, Nate, because I think that there are people that just assume that if they're a better person, then all of a sudden it would change their personality. If I had a better character, I'd be more outspoken. I'd have more confidence to go talk to people about the Lord. Or if I had a better personality, I would enjoy reading for hours on end and being introspective, and then I'd be a better person. And so we equate the change of personality and the encompassing spiritual habits that tend to be easier for some personalities than others to be, equitable with a change of character. But I don't think that that's what the thing is. Your personality is also God-given, but it's a container. And there are people with the same or similar, I shouldn't say the same, but similar personalities, but with two completely characters. One who uses that personality, for example, let's do someone who's outgoing or charismatic, right? They can use that to manipulate, to abuse, to influence, negatively. At the same time, they can use that to inspire, encourage, motivate. On the flip side, you got those who are more introspective and spend more time reading and reflecting, who can come up with absolutely terrible strategies to hurt people. But the same type of person can come up with concepts that can change the world. And so I think that this container versus this character, this inner being concept that you've been talking about, is so vitally important, because I find a lot of people either use their container or hide behind this container as an excuse for their bad character. Like, oh, I'm just introverted, that's why I was rude. Or, oh, I'm just extroverted, that's why I talked over or stole the show or whatever. And I hurt someone's feeling. Well, that's just my personality. Well, no, it's not just your personality. Your personality made you more susceptible to that, but it's your character. Your character decided to hurt this person. It was, you know what I'm saying? It was an outflow of that.
So I remember there's a certain segment within Adventism that idolizes extroversion. They're using the four humors, which I think is a terrible model for personality anyway. And they thought like, oh, what makes a really good Christian is a sanguine cleric or cleric sanguine.
Cleric sanguine.
Cleric sanguine. That is the ultimate, like that is the ultimate Christian. And I got in a dialogue with someone from this, and the behavior struck me quite culty, because this person was like, they asked me what I was, and I basically said I don't really buy into the four humor thing, because the whole concept was like, if you were too much of one thing, you'd have to bleed it out of you, like you had too much of the fluid in you. It's just a weird concept anyway. But I said, well, I am phlegmatic melancholy, which is the direct opposite of their idol. And they basically, well, then I think that you would probably not be a very good worker for the church. And then I just thought, and mind you, I've been working full-time ministry for like 7 years at the time. And I thought, so how long have you been in ministry? Well, I'm not currently in ministry right now. But I did it for a year and a half or 2 years. And then I thought, well, I'm going on my 7th year and I've had, really good success. So I don't, whoever told you that, they must be terribly mistaken. And so, I do think this is the thing about character that, even my wife, who is, sanguine cleric, and I'm gladly so, and I love that super sanguine
relationship.
Yeah, and so it's a very balanced relationship. It's really good. But she said, like, there's certain times when I was in church, she was just like, what kind of Nathaniel was that? You were super charming. You really poured it on. And I wasn't being fake. It was because
Right.
my character deemed introverted Nathaniel, right now, this is what you need to be. So get out of your shell, not because I wanted to be someone I'm not, but because this is what is needed for the moment to inspire your church to
Mhm.
do the right thing. And so that, to me, yes, there's the container, but I think God empowers you when you're choosing to do the right character, that you can step out of your container. Like you can
Right.
go beyond you. And that's when the Holy Spirit really works, is when you say, okay, I'm going to work on my character. This is my container. But God, you can do with me above and beyond what I could ask or think. And then that's when cool things happen, because then you can't go, well, that was me. So a sanguine that puts together, someone who's, oh, it's all about the party and everything, sits down
Mhm.
and writes a book, or someone like me decides to, run for president of the seminary, and try to make a change. And
Right.
then I go out of my container, not because I'm trying to be someone I'm not, but because my character's telling me, hey, this is what we need for the hour.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point of the contrast between you and Harani, your wife. I agree with you about the humors being not a good model. So it's interesting, but I'll continue using it because you did. I consider myself a choleric melancholy. My girlfriend is a sanguine phlegmatic, and so I'm all about getting the job done. I'm all about task and detail oriented,
Mhm.
and she's all about the people. Like she's all about people. She's a people pleaser. She wants everyone to be happy, everyone to be having a good time. And so in doing ministry with her, alongside her, she's been my barometer, because I tend to not think about certain aspects of worship and of ministry because I'm so focused on the task. And she reminds me of certain things, certain sanguine type of thoughts, that has been helpful. But to say that one is better than the other, to say that you can only do it if you fit this container correctly, is completely illogical, because God has created all of us with these personalities. And so the difficulty is that as a church, we don't always provide opportunities for certain personalities. When we overemphasize the performance aspect of church, the being upfront aspect of church, over the other side of being at church, that is when we begin to say you must fit a certain container rather than having a certain character to be appropriately following the Christian walk. And so we find people who are rejecting Christianity or rejecting Adventism or the walk of faith because they don't feel they fit the container, rather than they don't see themselves being able to change the character.
So I love what you guys are talking about here. And I think some of the struggle of new Christians often coming in is that they're like, if I'm a Christian, like a very big thing culture, like especially in Portland here, it's like, be weird, be you, you know, they're very weird and they're so different that that's not even, it's almost like a cult trendy thing. It's like a cool competition. So I would challenge it a little bit that it's not necessarily always being them. They're trying to compete being different is what it is. But
Well, it's funny because being weird just becomes normal, and it's not weird anymore. So being normal in Portland would actually be the true weird.
yeah.
Sorry, we were going to go that direction. Trust me, as someone that when I went to Portland, I felt at home, because growing up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, being weird was my thing. And then I
Yeah.
went to Portland, and I'm like, oh, these are my people. It's because I felt normal. So what would be weird in Portland would actually being normal.
Yeah. So there's like this shame though, like you're saying though, there's this shame, which is this tension that we experience to fit into a specific mold. The church has needs. You need to fit and become, basically you drive down the road and you see all these cookie cutters, all these houses, they look exactly the same because we need to reproduce our disciples, what we want you to look like. And therefore you have to do that become part of us at the expense of being who you are. But I feel like 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14, actually kind of the backdrop of it actually addresses what we're talking about here. you guys have any thoughts in regards to that? This isn't scripted again.
No, it's kind of interesting that if you even go back before that and you look at what the issue was in Corinth, like the one that was Paul decided I'm going to address this first, was that they were all kind of factioning up and being like three different cookies. You had the one that was following Cephas or Peter, one that was following Apollos, and one that was following Paul. And they were elevating the person above the scriptures, and they were doing all of that. And so there's this tremendous pressure that we do. And it's back to the talk that you had me before, Jeff, with social imaginary. And part of the escape it, we want to normalize things as groups of people, and we don't want people to be sticking out. And so even like you said, that's back to my point, like Portland wanting to be a trendsetter, and that comes way back to which people settled there. It was people who braved the Oregon Trail, and they were trendsetters, and so it's in their blood. That's what it means to be from Oregon. It's like, hey, we're not set in the East, let's go settle out and be these people who settled this land. And then like California was all about getting rich and famous because of the gold. So it's kind of this social thing sets us. So churches have this, they don't want someone that's different. But the problem is then what he says should fix that is actually embracing the different, because he said the parts that are, like uncomely, we should put more honor on them. So I think as leaders, if you're a leader in the church, I think a good leader would be looking for people who are going to bring in something that fixes the weak spot and not trying to make people cookie cutters.
I think there's a balance that needs to be struck between staying who you are, being yourself, but also changing for the better. Because I think in Christianity, we don't teach that you stay who you are. We teach that you are transformed into something better. The key is, who are you allowing to transform you? Are you allowing others who want you to fit their identity and fit their mold, or are you allowing Christ who wants you to fit his mold? And so I think that there's the challenge is recognizing the difference between those two. But because I wouldn't advocate stay who you are. I would say stay unique and don't allow others to manipulate and change you into a mold that, to be honest, is probably not even working. But I would say allow Christ to change you into who he intended you to be in the first place, which will be unique, which could be weird, it could be, who knows?
Really weird.
But no, it's allowing Christ to be that voice, allowing Christ and the Spirit to work in your life to change you for the better. And we're talking character. We're not talking personality here. Or I'm not saying that you're going to all of a sudden, like I said, be an outspoken person. There's the change. You're all of a sudden love knocking on doors all the time. Like that's not the transformation we're talking about, but rather the inner being of the person who at one point was enjoying things that they shouldn't, or was hating things that they should enjoy, whatever, vice versa. It's changing what the person is on their inner core. And that's something that only you know. I can't tell you what that is. We can't tell you what that is. That is your inner being. You probably don't even know who that is at the end of the day. But God does. And the Spirit of God does. And that is where you need to find and allow your identity to be transformed.
Yeah, so ultimately, what the verse that struck me when you were talking is this idea that we shouldn't be conformed, but we should be transformed. So conforming is like following what the society wants you to be, or it could be even your church. And they could be well-meaning people.
Right.
They could be conforming you. I mean, I've been in a lot of cliques and social groups in the church trying to conform, and I've always been an anti-conformist, so that's never been my problem.
That's true.
But once I got control of a clique, I've wielded it, or I got into a position, and it's just natural for us to conform people. And I think we need to focus on transformation, which is focusing on the inner being. Conformist focuses on the outer, changing the outward behavior primarily. And I've seen a lot of people, I have a lot of friends where the particular ministries are focusing on outward behavior modification.
Right.
Some of them are not in the church anymore. Like I have a lot of people I know and friends, they're just not there. And I think it's because the focus of the ministry wasn't transformational. It was conformative.
Right. And ultimately, conforming, it doesn't last. It doesn't produce a lasting change. What produces a lasting change is transformation. It's the inner being that when you change what's within, and when that gets changed, when your character, your behavior follows character,
Mm-hmm.
not the other way around. You may change your behavior, but you may have no idea why you're doing it.
Right.
Like there's certain aspects of behavior that can shift, but if you never truly know why, when push comes to shove, you'll revert back.
Because if you're doing, like, I did a lot of ministry with groups that were conformist, and a lot of people were doing it, but I don't know if their character was transformed, and they were all about selfish motivations. Whether it was outselling someone with mega booking or getting more Bible studies than the other person or more baptisms when they were preaching, they wanted to be the number one dog. And what is that in character? You know what I mean? One thing, striving to be your best because you want to be your best as an offering to God, versus I want to look the best, are completely different things.
Yeah, I like what that passage, if I recall in the Greek correctly, that conformed literally has this idea of this external pressure pushing in, and transformed is literally this internal transformation, like the which where we get more metamorphosis, which is where there's this, like what is it? Not the slug, but the caterpillar into a butterfly, where it's becoming more of what it's been created to be from the inside out, rather than. And then I was thinking about that and reading the Bible the other day, the story of Pilate, and how he wanted to free Jesus, but because of the social pressure of the crowds, which the Pharisees were controlling, wanting to crucify Jesus, everyone went along, like he cowered to and submitted to the group external pressure, just like John the Baptist killed, or not John the Baptist, Herod killed John the Baptist, beheaded him because of those who sat.
John the Baptist is not a conformer. No, yeah, I hear you.
But both of those figures, like seen as very strong people, and it's interesting, both big, powerful Roman leaders, but when they're thrown into social pressure, they cower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, kind of going back before we end, kind of going back to emotions.
Right.
So I think this is important because I think that the view of emotions and the view of thoughts is it can be shaped by these outward pressures. Like, this kind of emotion is wrong, or emotions are wrong, or we need to have this. And I think ultimately we have to go back to the Bible and let it define, what's appropriate and what's not. When is it okay to be angry? When is it not okay? When's the time to rejoice? When's the time to be sad? And let it transform us and transform our thoughts and transform our feelings, so that we can have that inner being that reacts rightly,
Mm-hmm.
In a transformed way, and not just doing it because this is what society says.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, like, God has made us, God has given us who we are, and the blessing of our emotions, the blessing of our thoughts, and ultimately, the transformation of our character and the desire to be more like him, because he's good, not just because it's what we should do, not because it's a platitude, I need to be more like Jesus. No, because we genuinely love who Jesus was.
Right.
The way he cared about people, the way he made a difference, stood up, was a non-conformer himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to see that and wanting to be more like that, and letting that be the motivation, not because of external pressure, like you said, which is there, which, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I have the temptation at times to conform to that.
Sure.
But recognizing that cannot be my ultimate motivation, and it cannot be the ultimate way I want others to be motivated.
Mm-hmm.
coming, it needs to be something where the heart, the inner being, is transformed.
For sure. And I guess going back to that passage, as we're finishing off here, the heart is deceitful of all things, who can know it? That, we're talking about, it's the inner being that that God is working this transformation. And like, if we really want to be ourselves, I think like the rest of the verse that says, I, the Lord, basically God searches the heart and the mind. He knows it. So to me, the best way to be in touch with who I really am is to invite God into that journey and journey with God. And I can actually truly be more who I am. And God can reveal that to me because he actually knows me. I feel like you had something to say about that, Andrew. You said, I saw some smiles there.
No, we're in our closing thoughts. I don't want to waste it going on another tangent, but
Yeah,
if I agree with you, I think that, I agree with you.
Well, thanks guys for this great convo. There's so much more to be said about this subject. Maybe we can gather another time. But yeah, Bible and human emotions and Jesus and worship and all sorts of great territory we've covered. But thank you for the great convo, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Yeah, it was good. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thanks for joining.